Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here now that we're a minute after the top of the hour. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, coaches and admin, teachers, parents, athletes, and supporters of PCA. On behalf of Positive Coaching Alliance, I'd like to welcome you all to our third roundtable in our SCBR, Sports Can Battle Racism Initiative. We are a national nonprofit that cultivates positive character building youth sports experience. My name is Marty Reed, and I'm the co-chair of our SCBR committee. And we're on a mission as leaders in the educational space to use sports as a vehicle to create positive change and inclusive environments, not only supporting better athletes, but more importantly, better people. So thank you all for joining us today. And if you've tuned into one of our roundtables in the past, you are aware that, we're bringing thought leaders together to have powerful conversations, important conversations, amplifying voices within the Black community and equipping individuals, schools, organizations with continued resources and support to combat racism and discrimination through sports. So today's discussion is specifically on college culture, and our topic is respect, why college impacts more than their campuses. You've probably seen it and read about it, but today we're going to hear from an extraordinary panel of experts in this space, and I hope you all are just as excited as I am. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of PCA Central Region and fellow co-chair of our SCBR committee, Trennis Jones, who will lead and moderate today's panel. Trennis?
Thank you, Marty. Thank you, Marty, and welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. Certainly thank you to our panelists. We know you guys are very busy, and in particular, there's a couple of you that have some things going today that we're grateful that you were able to hold this time for us. And so we're happy to have you. And without further ado, I want to jump into introducing our esteemed panel. And the way that I'll do that is I'll share a few things about their bio, and then I'll ask them a question, and then we'll jump into the general conversation. That'll be a lot more kind of flow back and forth between our panelists, and certainly you will hear less of me and more of them. And so alphabetically, we'll start with Dr. Akilah Carter-Francique. Dr. Carter-Francique is an associate professor at San Jose State University within the African American Studies Department. She is also and obviously San Jose State is steeped in history, certainly from social change through the work of Dr. Harry Edwards, and we're really grateful to have Dr. Carter-Francique with us. She also she's the executive director of the Institute of the Study of Sport, Society, and Social Change there. She is a proud alum of University of Georgia, where she receives her doctorate there, as well as being a track and field athlete at the University of Houston, where she ran the 100-meter hurdles as well as the long jump. So she has got a plethora of different experiences, and comes with a great amount of expertise in this. And so, Dr. Carter-Francique, thank you for joining us. My first question to you is, as a person that clearly cares about the culture around youth, just sports in general, certainly from a societal standpoint, but also from a campus standpoint, what question do you feel like what question do you wish more parents would ask of coaches and administrators as they're being recruited to certain campuses, with respect to how their kids are going to be nurtured and empowered as they potentially move on to someone's campus and continue their athletic and educational careers?
Gosh, loaded question. But first, I just want to say thank you for having me here. Thank you for the opportunity to share my voice, coming to you again from San Jose. But when we sort of dig into this, yes, as you said, I'm a former student athlete, went to University of Houston, go Cougs. My husband went to LSU, so we got the Tigers in the house, and my brother went to the University of Florida. So we were all track and field people. But as I think about this question, I just spoke with my mom about an hour ago, and I was like, well, what did you think? You know, because I wanted to kind of even go back to our days of that recruitment process. And they're both K-12 educators. And one of the things that, you know, my mom said was that we just really wanted the coaches sort of to serve as another parent. And the priority at that time, many moons ago, right, was safety, and safety from harm. But today it's safety from not only from sort of the physical harm, but some of the mental health challenges, safety from other challenges that they may experience as a young person on these campuses these days. I look at it really in a sense of trying to have parents and really ask coaches about this notion of holistic support, this notion of social support. And so within the athletic realm, because I think we need to talk about that in two ways. One, providing social support from an athletic standpoint. So, you know, what academic tutors are available? What mentors? Should I get injured? What support will I have access to with regard to sort of health insurance and scholarship, or as we call it, grant and aid, right? But even from a social support standpoint of within the greater university, to include the academic department. So what academic tutors, financial aid, library services, writing center, health services, cultural centers, student groups, career services, mentors, international study abroad opportunities, and really what we're seeing today, there's a great need for the mental health services, right? So again, speaking to issues of holistic and culturally relevant. And just to kind of backtrack, what do I mean about social support? I mean, these 4 different areas is an area where I've spoken and done some research in, but looking at emotional support. You know, are these coaches, are these universities going to create an environment where our young people can learn about and develop trust and feel that they are being cared about in this space? To be able to provide, of course, you know, appraisal support. You're doing a good job, right? And what you're doing, you know, day to day, week to week, semester to semester. Instrumental support. So, you know, tangible aid and service. So are we being able to identify some of those resources and really get help in our financial needs, if you will? And then lastly, that informational. Are we getting advice, suggestions, and being led in different ways to those resources that can fully help us manage our day-to-day, help us manage our year-to-year, and help us to be productive citizens once we graduate and move on from our respective institutions.
I love that. And you did not ask whether or not your son or daughter would start or not, which is interesting. So I appreciate that was not leading the question for you. So I'm grateful for that. Yes. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you for being here. Moving next to Rick George, who is the athletic director at the University of Colorado. Go Buffs. Shamelessly, I am, not shamelessly, but so proudly, I am an alum, and I'm grateful for Rick being here. Rick has certainly had an instrumental career in athletics, serving certainly as the former president of business operations for the Texas Rangers, serving as the executive VP and chief of operations for the PGA Tour, as well as the president of the Champions Tour. And one of the things, and certainly a proud graduate of the University of Illinois, where he played football and was a cornerback, and was
a long time ago.
A long time, but still on the resume. So we will not disparage it being long or short. But one of the things that you know, I knew of, but then wanted to make sure that I confirmed, and really things that I'm proud of you and proud of what you accomplished with this, is that you are the only current athletic director in the Power Five that has hired consecutively 2 Black head football coaches, and only the 3rd ever in the Power Five, you know, following Northwestern and Vanderbilt. So it's sad that that's the case, where there's 3 people that have been able to accomplish that, but clearly you are one of those people that has been able to do that. And so, as that's something that you have done, Was it something that you did intentionally, and how did you accomplish something that clearly is so difficult for a lot of other people to get done?
Well, look, I think in our industry, we don't have enough diversity in our head coaching positions and in our administrative positions, frankly, in college athletics. And that's why I'm a big fan of the Rooney Rule and what they're trying to do in the NFL. And there may be things that we can do, as an industry to ensure. And one thing that we just adopted was something that our basketball court coaches, John Calipari, led, is the McClendon Minority Internship. And that's going to really help. But going back to your question about how did we get there, I think it's important when you talk about getting more African Americans in these key roles. So when we look for a head coach, we're looking first at a defensive or an offensive coordinator, a sitting coordinator at a Power 5 school. Or we're looking for a sitting coach at a group of 5, or we're looking for somebody in the NFL that has some college experience, that, all these different things. And, as we hired, the first coach, he was a sitting defensive coordinator at the University of Georgia. And he was African-American, incredible interviewer. And I wouldn't say I went in there looking for a black African-American coach. I was really looking for the best coach, and he was both. And as you know, in Boulder, we're a very white community. Our campus is very white. And our student athletes need people that look like them, that have shared experiences that they have. And so, when I met with the first one, and he only was here a year and he did some great things, but, he checked everything. And his passion for, the student athlete was important to us. And then, as we went and he left and went to another school. And so, we had the opportunity. And again, the best candidate was somebody that had been a head coach in college earlier in his career. He just happened to be the assistant head coach at the Miami Dolphins. His daughter played volleyball here, and that really didn't come into it. But again, having somebody, a head coach, particularly at an institution like ours that's white, that can share and relate to student athletes, particularly during these times of, anti-racism and social injustice, and to have a coach that can articulate and talk to his student athletes, and his student athletes can go to him. I think that's important. And I think we've got to do a better job as an industry of getting more Black candidates in areas of our head coaches and administration. And I think this minority program that John Calipari and others created, we're actually in process of hiring our first candidate. And we're excited about that. And we're going to teach them this business, so we can start creating a talent pool that in future years, we can change the diversity, but we have to focus on it and do it right. So I know that was a long answer to your question, but I'm pretty passionate about that.
That's awesome. And it's not just hiring that person, it's trying to create a pipeline, because that's way more consistent than, one person. And so I applaud you there. Thank you for being here. Moving on, Mrs. Imani McGee-Stafford. Imani is a WNBA player with the Dallas Wings. She was the 10th pick of the 2016 WNBA draft. She's currently stepping away from the WNBA to pursue her law degree at Southwestern Law School in LA. Imani was a first team All Big 12 player at the University of Texas. And she also was presented with the Honda Inspiration Award through using her voice as well as her poetry to motivate others. She also happens to be the cousin of our very own Marty Reed. So Imani, thank you for being here. The question I have for you is clearly you're a talented and passionate person. How important was it in your formative years to interact with coaches that inspired you or asked you or allowed you to do more than just shut up and dribble?
Super important. I'm a big proponent of like, you don't get anywhere by yourself, right? And I think oftentimes we overlook how big and formative coaches are in not only forming these athletes, but forming their full identity. And so for me, like ironically, even though I come from the biggest sports family, for those who don't know, my mother is a Hall of Fame basketball player. My older brother plays for the Lakers right now, JaVale McGee. And on my father's side, he played in college and overseas. His sister played in the WNBA, is a college coach now. So everyone else around me knew I was going to play basketball eventually. But being the little rebel I did everything but basketball. So growing up, I was into arts, I was into theater, I was into computers, I was into all these different things. And my freshman year of high school, I made the lead in the school play and varsity basketball, and I couldn't do both. And realistically, I was already 6'5". I wasn't going to get a scholarship to Juilliard being a 6'5" actress. That was just the realistic part of it all. But at the same time, everybody around me kind of understood I needed those outlets, because basketball was not only a lot of pressure because of my familial background, it was the only kind of outlet I had. So I needed to have different things that I could be interested in and kind of have like no pressure, no stress. And when I got to college, it was more of the same. Karen Aston at the University of Texas, I love her to this day. And one of the biggest things about her, granted, we butt heads all through season. All through season, she tells me I am her biggest lesson as a coach. But outside of season, I also knew that she cared about me as a person. So all of the things that would happen during season, I was able to kind of compartmentalize it into being basketball, into being the game, into being like, at the end of the day, this is a business and she has to make decisions that may not always benefit me, because I knew she cared about me as a person, because she allowed me to kind of explore my other interests. And I think it's so important for us to do that now with children, because, like 2% go pro, right? And so many of us get to that finish line of college athletics and don't know who we are without that. And we're not really able to separate our worth and who we are as athletes. If we don't have a good game, that's now I'm a bad person or I'm not good enough. And being able to separate those two comes directly from who you have around you, right? Do your coaches give you time to explore everything? Do they push you to be more than an athlete? And those things matter. Like even in so much as stepping away, I arguably stepped away at the prime of my career. I'm 25 years old and I stepped away from basketball to go pursue a law degree. And even my own brother was like, like, are you sure about this? And because I had people around me that supported me, like I thought when I got accepted, first, I didn't think I was going to get accepted to the program. I just kind of was like, let me try and figure out I'm going to do during Corona. I got accepted with a 50% scholarship. I thought when I called my agent, he was going to yell at me and tell me I was dumb. And he was immediately like, is this what we want to do? Then we're doing it. Great. Awesome. He was like, but you need to call your GM and your coach. I called them and I thought they were going to cut ties with me. And they immediately were like, we're so proud of you. Like, we're going to suspend you, which means that once I come back, I will have my contract. It'll like they're obligated to pay me what I was earning when I left, which is something that they did not have to do. They could have easily cut me and had no ties. Which would have made my kind of path back to the league a lot harder. So those three little moments, right, where somebody believing in me outside of being an athlete, my entire journey to law school started because someone that worked in our front office, she worked with community engagement, and I enjoy doing a lot of community engagement. So we spent a lot of time together. And I kind of just mentioned to her one off, like, hey, I think I might want to go to law school one day. Not thinking much into it, kind of one of those like big dreams. And she immediately was like, oh, I just took the LSAT. I can give you all my study materials. And I remember being like, no, like, I don't think I can really do it. And she was like, no, just try it. And that little moment of encouragement started me down this path. And here I am, right, in law school and doing these things. So it's so crucial to push athletes to do more than be whatever sport they play. And also to acknowledge that they are more than whatever sport they play, even if they haven't found their outside passions, because those things matter. And I think we've seen with our current kind of social climate that athletes have so much more power than what they do on the court. And we have to start teaching them that in high school, in college, so that when they are and they do have these platforms, they can use it for something bigger than just winning games.
No, that's awesome. And clearly you had a strong circle. You had people that were pouring into you, and in essence, you are now pouring into other people, which is what is supposed to happen anyway. So thank you for being here. Next, Mr. Rodney Page. Mr. Page is a mentor, a coach, an educator. He is also the first African-American coach ever at the University of Texas, the first women's basketball coach there. He is currently serving at Success High School in Round Rock, Texas, as a mentor and serving and running a mentor program from there. He has been honored, and he's probably upset for me sharing these things, but he's been honored obviously multiple times through his life, and a couple with, through the NCAA, as well as an organization called Recognize Good, to recognize him as a leader, as a person that just walks the walk. And so, Mr. Page, I know that you have taught a lot of people a lot of things, including myself. And I just wanted to ask you the question, of all of the lessons that you've taught, is there one that is the stickiest to you, the one that sticks out above the others?
A lot of them, but I can narrow it down. First and foremost, it's an honor to be on this Zoom call, to be in the midst of you. I've heard some things that I'm so touched by from all three of you so far that have gone before me. I'm a graduate of the University of Houston, undergrad and master's, way back 69 and 72. Born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. So I know a little bit about LSU before integration, a long time back. So having said that, I'm from a different generation. I turned 72 years old several weeks ago. So I've seen a lot of things. I've experienced a lot of things. I've endured a lot of things. One of the most important lessons that I have learned, not just have taught, I have learned, because all I ever teach is what I've learned. It's my life that I teach. That's what I teach from. And one of the most important things I've learned and passed on, and still pass on, is that it's not so much in life what happens to us, it's what we do with it. It's how we deal with it. And this comes from my generation. We knew what was going on. We knew who, all about race, and I'm from the era of Jim Crow. We understood what the obstacles were. But we were also taught to never let that defeat you or stop you. So again, it's not so much what happens to us in life, it's what we do with it. It's how we deal with it. And I came to understand what I call an AT&T club. So how do we adapt? How do you deal with what shows up? How do we adapt? I don't mean sell out, never, ever, but sell up. So how do we adapt? And then the first T is, how do we transcend? In my generation, we always got through it. There were no other options. Well, there was, that become a victim, but never, ever. So you always knew you had to get through it, over it, under it, around it, or right through it. And then the last T is, how do you grow and transform into a better version of yourself? Those are things I learned from people around me who look like me, because two separate worlds. And I learned this threefold. I refuse to quit. I refuse to give up. I refuse to become a victim. Those things were instilled in me early in life, in the heart of segregation. They were instilled in me. My coaching career, I came to understand, and this is all relative and connected, in coaching basketball, 94 by 50 feet. You would say it's a basketball court, but in reality, it's a life court. Because everything that happens on that basketball court is happening in real life. Decision-making, problem solving, cause and effect, equity, diversity, happiness, sadness, joy, depression, exhilaration, everything. And that's how I began to teach the game. I would tell people, I'm tricking you. I'm using this basketball to teach you about life. Because everything that happens on this court is showing up in real life. So those are some of the things, and I have to say it that way, that I've learned in my journey. Is simply I pass on. As a coach, I'm a life coach and a consultant at a you could say an alternative school where the needs are great. So many lives are hanging in the balance, teetering on the edge. I could say more, but that's probably enough. Yeah.
No, it's never enough. But thank you for being here, and certainly that's you're living that, and so it's obviously a lot easier for those to follow you because they know that that's the energy that you put out. So grateful for you being here and doing what you do. Certainly, last but not least, just because his last name ends with Z, Mr. Jamie Zaninovich, who is the COO as well as leading with being the deputy commissioner for the Pac-12 conferences, in addition to being the COO. Jamie has had a career certainly in bringing people together in partnerships. Certainly, he served as the commissioner for the West Coast Conference before being with the Pac-12, as well as serving at Princeton University as their senior associate athletic director for external affairs. He is twice an alum of his proud Stanford University, and he's on our National Advisory Board. Jamie, thank you for being here. The question I have for you as a person that's been at the table in partnership and developing certain things, how important and why is it so important that everybody at the table brings something unique to the table with respect to diversity, so you can have an end goal or an end result that is equitable and is fair and is powerful by way of all the diversity that you would have sitting around a table in developing a partnership. Why is that so important?
First of all, thanks for having me. I was taking a bunch of notes there, listening to Rodney and others. Man, I'm certainly humbled to be part of this group. So on partnerships, I think it's really simple. I mean, we all are sports people and we're all team sports people, I think. And team sports are all about the power of diversity, right? I think we can all agree that when you put together a team, and I think this is getting more high profile than ever, that the best team is going to be that brings the most diverse perspectives, whether that's regional, racial, sexual orientation, whatever it is. The more diverse you are, the more voices in the room, the more different voices in the room you're going to have, and your outcome is going to be better than it could be. And I think it's the same for partners. I mean, if you think of partners as bringing in teammates, it's the same way. I mean, in a conference, we have a lot of committees. Rick can tell you there's a lot of that. We do have a diversity leadership committee that's chaired by Alan Green, the faculty member from USC, and Pat Chun, athletic director from Washington State, and they spend their time on this. They spend their time thinking about how do we populate our student athlete members, our athletic director members, and everyone else that has input into conference policy in a diverse way that brings the most perspective to those decisions. So I think that's how I would think about partnerships. I mean, in terms of some of the partnerships we've done, Rick mentioned the McClendon Foundation. Just a little bit more on that. That was our 12 basketball coaches brought that to our conference. They collectively decided that they wanted to do something to make sure that we had started building a more diverse pool of candidates. So each of them have committed personally to fund one intern, not in basketball, but in administration separate from basketball for 4 years. So 4 years on our campuses, we'll have people of color as interns that will add to that pool, as Rick mentioned, and his coach, Tad Boyle, actually led that initiative. So those are sort of some of the partnerships that we're working on. We're also working on a broad voting initiative. All of our schools are committed to get every one of their student athletes to vote. Nonpartisan, just to make sure that the student athletes participated in the democratic process. And I know we're tracking that. We have at least one institution that's 100%, and we're confident by November 3rd, we literally will have any willing and able student athlete on a Pac-12 campus, and we have 7,000 of them registered to vote. And the next step is to make sure that they do vote. So those are just a couple examples of the partnerships that we're running now at the Pac-12. But back to the original question, diversity is a strength, and we need to embrace it as a strength. And we need to work very hard to make sure that it's represented so you can then leverage it as a strength. I think that's the lesson of partnerships.
No, thank you for that. And like I said, you guys are living it, and you're in the midst of it too, which is interesting, right? That you're developing this thing almost on the, not on the fly, but certainly as as we're watching you all do those things, I think it's so important. So thank everybody for being here. We're going to open it up a bit with the conversation. The three kind of topics that we're going to deal with are going to be around cultures, clearly, but communication being one, representation being the other, and the last being responsibility. And so, I wanted to kick it off with Dr. Carter-Francique, but please feel free to kind of join in as we have this conversation around specifically the culture and why communicating is so effective and efficient and necessary, to develop the culture that we seek. So, Dr. Carter-Francique, we how people treat one another, and how important respect is obviously important to all of us. What demands, and I say demands, right? So I'm using that word intentionally. What demands should we make of our colleagues and coaches and administrators on campus to reflect us feeling that respect is so important and so impactful and necessary on the campuses? What demands should we make of one another to ensure that happens?
I don't really see it as a demand. I mean, as much as we want to sort of push that notion, I don't really see it as a demand, and perhaps that's the educator in me, because I think it's one in which we should educate others to understand, because at some foundational level, there is a disconnect or perhaps disagreement amongst definitions of what respect is and of what race and racism are. And so if we can begin to educate and begin to understand the definition and have a clear understanding of what that is and all be on the same page, then we can unfold not only the definitions, but we can begin to unfold the histories. We can unfold the lived experiences. We can utilize platforms like this, right, to set a standard and build a community. But we got to be real, sport is a microcosm, right, of society. And so it reflects the good and the bad. It mirrors racism in many ways, sexism, homophobia, but as well as grace, right, as well as compassion and honor and dignity and respect. And so as coaches, I believe it's their responsibility to embody this role of educator, of trainer, of a teacher specialized in a skill set. As I'm gonna give Coach Page, Dr. Page, because he just gave us some schooling as I was taking copious notes of all the saying. But through this mode of sport, we do learn a lot of life lessons. We are learning daily about what we can take and what we can push ourselves to do. But in that, we're learning to communicate with others and get over some of those hurdles that we have in these particular spaces. So I think, coaches set the tone as it relates to their leadership, their instruction, and their embodiment of those values. Those ideals also should be heavily rooted in the mission, the goals, and the values of the organization as well. So ultimately, we have an organization that fosters a culture of respect and sets that tone.
Love it, love it. Anybody else jump in on that the respect piece?
I'd love to, because it's really important to what we do in our department. And I think as you create culture, it starts with your core values, and those are the non-negotiables. And so fortunately, our first core value is about respect, and it's about respecting each other's differences. And then it goes on to accountability and passion. And our core values are so important to our culture and who we are. We make hiring and firing decisions based on adherence to those core values. It's actually in all of our performance evaluations that we evaluate those 5 areas of our support, those that report up to us. And that's really important as you create culture, but they're non-negotiables. So if they're non-negotiables, if somebody doesn't adhere to those core values that we've spent a lot of time, not just talking about, but putting definition behind,
what does it mean?
yes, they mean something. And so if somebody doesn't adhere to those, then we have to act. And I think that sets the tone and sets kind of the framework of where we're headed with our department. But respect is our first core value.
In all of my work in life coaching and mentoring with groups, I only have one rule, and that's respect. I only have one, but we talk about what that means in certain situations as it comes up. But I have to embody that. I love that word. First and foremost, I have to model that. I struggle with that word demand, probably because I'm so ornery and no one can demand anything of me. They can make requests, but not demands. What I have learned in my journey as a teacher, as a coach, as a leader, is that it's more important to command respect than demand it. People will give you that respect if you carry yourself and command it. There's a difference. I like what the doctor said about the definition of terms and words. But this is just an old guy speaking from my personal experience. But again, I'm ornery. Can't nobody demand anything of me. They can make requests, but not demand. Okay, but that's just me. Yeah, but I understand the purpose. I understand it. But I got to say something about the AD. I missed it. You mentioned McClendon. You talking about John McClendon, I'm sure. Not enough people know that story or his story. And then you mentioned the Rooney Rule, and I would add another fellow, Fritz Pollard, the senior. Yeah, I mean, wow. But so I commend you for even knowing about that. Yeah.
For those of us, like the sad little 25-year-old over here, can you please expound on those points and who they are and why they're so important?
Rodney, do you want to do that?
The name?
I think that a little bit of history on John McClendon, right? Was that the request?
Yeah, wow.
And the Rooney Rule. I know who John McClendon is, but the Rooney Rule and the two names you mentioned, I don't, so.
Ooh, Fritz Pollard, I'm going with the oldest one. He's way back, probably the first African-American football coach in the NFL, way back, way back. And then he had a son who was in the 36 Olympics, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody help me with the history. And his alliance is still around, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember him by a great quote: "We all drink from wells that we did not dig." And that's part of their line of the Fritz Pollard alliance now. But this is going way back. But again, I'm from a different generation. It's powerful, though. His story is powerful. So you Google him and look him up from way back. I can't give you the years, but this is, I don't know, 20s, way back, even probably before that. And then some others have carried on his work in the Fritz Pollard Alliance. And then we get into the Rooney Rule, which is, and you can only give praise to the Pittsburgh Steelers, the old man Rooney, I guess, you know. He saw something that not many others saw, you know, and was willing to step out. And then John McClendon, not even enough basketball folk know about John McClendon. No. Unfortunately, his impact and influence. Yeah. But thank you for asking, though. That tells me something about you. That's good. Rick George, anything you want to add to that?
Nope. The Rooney Rule is the rule in the NFL that comes after the late owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe. Correct.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's their hiring practices to make sure that there's minority candidates available for their key positions, like the head coaches and the offense and defensive coordinators. And we actually have one of our greats that I think is going to be the next black head coach in the NFL, Eric Bieniemy, who played for us. Yeah. He's offensive coordinator at the Kansas City Chiefs. And so the Rooney Rule, I think, is a great effort by the NFL to ensure that more minority candidates are being looked at.
That's powerful stuff. And moving in, I want to make sure that we're, keeping with the time, but moving to representation. And Imani, had, this question for you. Why is it so important for you to see people that look like you in positions of power?
And I say this so much. This is like my biggest thing. And it's also one of the biggest reasons, like I go back home and I talk to kids and I tell them, like, I have a great story now, right? Like I graduated, I got kicked out of high school my senior year. I barely made it to college. I almost lost my scholarship. I was definitely one of those kids that were teetering, and it looked like I had everything together. And whew, people that know me now, and I'm sure Marty can contest to this, me at 16 and who I am today, 10 years later, is a definitely whole different person. And a lot of people did not see me being here. And a lot of that goes back to representation and why I go back so much. It's very hard to tell a child to be something they've never seen. You can say, oh, well, we watched the Cosby Show and we watched My Wife and Kids and I saw that. That doesn't count. TV does not count. You can't tell me that I can be something that I've not tangibly touched or seen. And when we talk about inner cities and we talk about underserved communities, right? If I grow up in an environment where my mother has not graduated high school, my father or my sister or my brother may be incarcerated, how do you tell me I should grow up and want to be an engineer? That's unrealistic. That's unrealistic. I haven't seen it done. I haven't seen anybody that came from my circumstances that look like me that have done these things. So my biggest thing about representation is not only is it necessary, but it's necessary to be transparent, right? You can't go into these situations and tell about all your victories because that doesn't matter. We know you made it. We see that. How did you get there? Right? One of my favorite sayings is, it's not just about making it to the top as so much it is about putting the ladder back down. Right? Like I need to know even something as small as growing up with a mother that was a WNBA player. When it was time for me to get drafted, I asked the greats. I asked Tina Thompson, I asked Cynthia Cooper, I asked Pamela McGee. Like I had these people at my disposal to say, like, how do I do this? As opposed to growing up in my teammate from college, her family didn't play sports. She was literally the only one in her family to play sports. So when it was time for her to get drafted, she calls me like, Moni, what do I do? And it's little things like that that matter. So going back to these neighborhoods and telling people like, this is how I did it. These are the things you need to be involved in because who's going to do it if we don't? And that's my biggest conversation is like, I promise you nobody saw me being this person. I promise you. But because so many people poured into me and kept dragging me along, here I am. So it's my duty to go back and talk to people that grew up in the same neighborhoods that I did, that went to the same schools that I did, and show them how they get out of their situation, how they change their situation.
I love that. I love it. Anybody else with that, just in terms of just making sure that you can see where you want to go? And Dr. Carter-Francique, I'm looking at you because you've clearly got the doctorate, there. How did you aspire to the space that you're currently in? Was it were you inspired by a person?
No, I wasn't. I mean, to Imani's point, I didn't know anybody that was a student athlete that then, became a PhD. That was very foreign to me. And even having educator parents who, yes, had achieved their master's degree, I didn't necessarily have a female role model that I knew was sort of in that space. And so I was poured into in several ways, not only from teammates and peers to coaches to, of course, my parents, and then getting into different spaces. I always tell the story about how I got my doctorate. Dr. Billy Hawkins, he had a book called The New Plantation, The Colonization of the Black Athlete. And while I was at the University of Georgia, I came upon his book, realized he was at UGA, and his office was in the building I was working in. I was working in campus recreation as an administrator, and went to see him and asked for a copy of the book because I was, I said, I'm a former athlete as well. He said, you should really get your doctorate. I said, no, just want the book. But in that, he had such grace and invited me to come speak and sort of share my story in his class. And then invited me to another class to sort of share my story. And then all of a sudden I was hooked. But long story short, in that, to even think of the work that I do now, which is telling the story of Black women in sport. As I was beginning my dissertation, it was one where I was doing a lot of reading, and I didn't see we as Black women in those books, in those stories. And I communicated with him, like, I said, I don't see us. I said, could I do my dissertation on Black women? And his answer to me was, I'm glad you got here. He was waiting for me to do that. And so that's what I do. And I have a number of sister docs, and we work and write the stories of women that have historically been silenced, have been invisible, to tell the story of Pam and Paula McGee, to tell the story of, you know, those that we don't know, a Lucy Digslow, or a Washington, you know, and to even our current women today that are doing such amazing things. Representation means so much, to be able to see yourself and know that you can do great things, and to have multiple stories, to know that it's not just one narrative, but there's multiple narratives, and it means so much. And again, and moving in this pathway. And so that's my goal, is to continue to tell those stories, continue to unveil those voices, and continue to speak into young people and let them know you matter, you're of value, and you have a story to tell.
Thank you for that. Mr. Page, thoughts on that, just in terms of how do you just, you know, create or really just inspire people to be their best selves, right? And not looking to copy anybody, but certainly how do you, you know, pour in and plant a seed within a person?
First and foremost, I think I heard someone mention the word worth 10, 15 minutes ago. Yeah, Imani. First and foremost, we have to help them understand that they have significant worth as a human being. It begins and ends with self-worth. And identity is a huge part of that. But the inspiration is to help them find their purpose. And I'll use in calling in life. Now that's a lot at young age, but the purpose, the gifts are inside of them. And I found the best way is to help to share a little bit of my story, not all of it, but just a little bit, bits and pieces. Because what I have found that helps them make sense of their story and their journey. Someone, I think the good doctor mentioned, everyone has a story. And it's so true. But so many young people don't feel like their story or themselves are worthy. So it begins and ends with self-worth. And help them see and understand how worthy they are as human beings, no matter what has happened to them in their lives. Unconditional acceptance. And help them see that their life has significant worth and dignity. And then help draw out. So much of my work is drawing out, not just putting in. It's drawing out. The questions we ask are far more important than any answers or any information we can give them. I've learned that over the years, and I work with thousands at every level. But it is about inspiration more than motivation. It's leading forth, especially as you get older like me, because you don't have the energy. It's leading forth rather than just pushing. So great question. A great question.
Thank you for that. And moving into that responsibility that we have, right? You know, Jamie, as you've been around campuses and certainly where you are from a conference perspective, you know, what mentality do organizations, do schools themselves need to have to ensure that there is a relational, not transactional relationship with the current and also the former players that end up attending, you know, those universities or, you know, competing within those conferences? You know, how do we maintain, or how do we create an opportunity for that to be relational, not transactional?
Yeah, great question, and you know, something I actually wanted to bring up. Rick and I obviously are different than everybody else in this panel, right? We represent the most privileged class in the United States. We're white men. We're also white men also dominate college athletics in an institution that over-indexes with African-American student athletes. So I don't want to speak for Rick, but I know my perspective, and I think Rick would share it, is that, you know, with that privilege comes responsibility and obligation, right? It's our responsibility and obligation to, one, make sure we create experiences, transformative experiences for student athletes of all ilk, but we have we over-index, especially in our most high-profile sports with African-American men and women, that we use this platform of college sports to create transformative life, altering experiences, right? Take that, young 17-year-old that our coaches go into their homes and say, come, parents, give me your young person, we'll turn them into an adult, and deliver on that promise. And listen, we certainly have our challenges. We have sort of, colliding social justice and anti-racism challenges, pay for play challenges, COVID challenges, but they all sort of tie together, I think. And it's a very unique time for us, and a good time for us to probably reset how we think about that student athlete compact. I'll kick it to Rick, because I know he's done a lot on his campus in this area around sort of how you build leaders for tomorrow and responsibility for that. So I don't mean to preempt you, Trentis, but Rick, maybe you can speak on a practical level.
Yeah, I just, again, I'm hearing all these different things, and I could take, stuff from everybody, but, the key is to ask and then to listen. And we've got to engage student athletes today. They have a voice, and we got to respect them. And Dr. Page, I go back to, what you say about, we've got to give them, I don't know, worth, but show them how valuable they are. But they're the key part of all of this. And that's why we come to work every day. And I tell our staff all the time, if you can't be passionate about coming to work every day and serving our student athlete, this is not a good place for you. Because these young people need us still. These are really important years in their life. And so when we ask them a question, we don't want to just, how you doing? We've got to listen, and we've got to understand. And then we've also have a responsibility to educate. And we're starting with ourselves first, so as we've gone through the things that are happening in our society today, we bring in Alexis Williams, who now is our diversity and inclusion officer. She was at the University of Houston. We stole her back. And she was here a few years ago. We just had Dr. Moore, Leonard Moore from the University of Texas, who is awesome, and met with all of our student athletes, our coaches, and our staff. We have to fix our community before we can fix our greater community. And so that's been our focus. And it's about education. It's about giving these young people a voice and allowing them to, tell us what's on their mind and be able to give them a platform. But we've got to listen to them. We can't just kind of check the box, right? Which is what we've done historically for years. And now we're at a point where it's time for action. And so we're educating. We're in that process where we're educating with my leadership team, then with our coaches, then with our staff and our student athletes all at the same time. Dr. Moore was one of the first, but we're going to do brown bag lunches where we invite the campus and our student athletes together to talk, to share. Breonna Taylor having those discussions. Our football team had that today, and it was very emotional. But we've got to talk about it. We can't hide behind it. And these young people are looking at us, and we've got to be role models in that regard. So I know a little bit of a tangent, but I'm pretty passionate about that subject as well.
Thank you, Rick. And Imani, speak, if you would, just to that dialogue piece of why that was so important, even with Coach Aston, who is an amazing woman for sure. Why you were able to butt heads, but know that she loved you, and because she was able to build a relationship and there was dialogue between the two of you.
I think often we always tell children and kids to be coachable, right? That's our first thing we say. But the way it's easy to be coachable when I know we all have a common goal, right? Like I can yell at my teammate because at the end of the day, like I know we just trying to win, and she knows. And I'm like, bro, we just trying to win. I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm not trying to make you look bad. I just want to win. And when we have that kind of mutual understanding, I could cuss at you. I could yell at you. It don't matter, because at the end of the day, I know like that's my person. I know she got my back. And when we get into situations with coaches, oftentimes they come to my neighborhood. They tell my parents what they want to hear. Right? They recruit me because I'm the top 5 recruit in my spot, but we don't make a relationship. So when you're yelling at me, when you're trying to coach me, that feels different, because I don't really know if you have my best interest at heart. I don't know if this is a personal attack. I don't know. I just don't know. But because I built this relationship with my coach outside of sports, I know that she would never do anything to hurt me. I know that it might hurt in the moment. I cried every day of my freshman year of college, but I know that she's doing this for the betterment of me. And a lot of times I think that that's the disconnect, right? That's the question of it, right? Like recently we saw the Texas football players demand that the university change the racist names on buildings, take down the statues, donate, I think it was like 0.05% of their revenue to Black Lives Matter. And the fact that they knew that they had that power at 2021 as a University of Texas football player is amazing, because I didn't know that at that age. And then follow that up by actually demanding for them to actually take action, right? Like I'm telling you what I need and I'm asking you to take action, because as much as we are in, especially in this current social climate, you can't tell me that you care about me as a player, but we don't address Black Lives Matter. We don't talk about Breonna Taylor. You don't ask me, how am I doing as I experience this, right? Because it's so great to have my name on the side of this campus, right? My face on the wall. But if I still feel as though I'm just another Black kid on this campus and no one cares about me in athletics and when I walk outside, then what's really happening here? How can you say you care about me, but you ignore this huge part of my identity? Every time I place that jersey on, you can't tell me like, oh, I need you to put down this part of your identity. Now you're a Texas athlete. That's not how that works. And you shouldn't ask me to do that. And I think what you guys have going is right, because that conversation has to be started from you guys. It can't come from me, right? You can't, one of my favorite quotes is, we constantly ask the oppressed to educate the oppressor about the error of their ways. I don't want to teach you how to help me. I want you to be confident enough to have this conversation with me, to put systems in place where these things matter. So the fact that you guys are doing that from the top down, that matters. That matters. And it may seem something so small, but it has to come from the top down. These conversations have to be, I don't want to always be the Black kid that's talking about Black lives in my own class where I'm the only one of two Black kids. I don't want to do that all the time. I don't want people to immediately be like, well, here she goes. But if that is coming from an institutional perspective, right? If my coach is having these conversations, if my coach is making areas for us to have these conversations, our AD is making arenas to have these conversations and making it a priority, that's a completely different thing.
That's powerful stuff, and that's a word, and I don't know if we can top that.
There's a reality here, though. Again,
yes,
I'm from a different generation, and I'm gonna say this tongue in cheek, kind of funny, because I find myself having to say this, having been saying this for many, many years. I'm tired of educating white folk. So maybe it should come from the top, but it's got to come from somewhere. And this is a different era now where people are more open than they have ever been. And I commend my two white brothers here, and I mean that, white brothers. I commend them for their openness and the way and how they're trying to commit action, not words, because talk is cheap. But no matter how it comes, it needs to come. But too often it has had to come from us, because our brothers have not always been open. Our brothers and sisters have not always been open. But that's just been the call of my life and many others before me. But I understand what you're saying. Most definitely, I understand.
Thank you. And I know we need to be respectful of everybody's time. So I want to bring us to a close. I want to thank each and every one of you all, and I'm going to kick it to Marty Reed, but certainly Imani, now Dr. Page.
No, I'm not. But thank you. I appreciate that.
We'll take that. We'll take it. Jamie, thank you for that. Rick, thank you for being here. Dr. Carter-Francique, thank you all for willing, to have this tough conversation, and be willing to be vulnerable and to share your thoughts on this and how do we improve and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I wanted to kick it to my colleague, and probably most importantly, Imani's cousin, Marty Reed.
Right. I'm going to be known as Imani's cousin from now on. Thank you, Trinus. Thank you to all of our panelists today. I mean, wow, what an amazing conversation. And I'm truly inspired and really overwhelmed with gratitude and duty to continue this work in anti-racism, diversity, equity and inclusion in sports. I mean, committed to this cause that's bigger than every one of us here today and generations to come. I mean, Jamie Zaninovich explained the myths of challenges using this platform of college sports to create life-transforming experiences. You know, Dr. Carter-Francique mentioning the importance of parents asking coaches for holistic support in both athletic and academic arenas, you know, mental health services, career development, social support, emotional support, etc. Rick George, how important core values are to who we are, with respect being, you know, one of those non-negotiable core values, respecting others and their unique differences. And Rodney sharing, you know, the command rather than demand, right, respect, and the powerful quote he shared, "We all drink from wells that we did not dig." Wow, just so powerful. And after, you know, going through a generation where Jim Crow was the norm, Rodney refused to give up, refused to quit, and focused on how do we transcend and grow and transform into better versions of ourselves. Just extremely powerful. And, you know, last but not least, my cousin Imani mentioning the importance of representation, your support system, and the importance of coaches that allow their players to explore, you know, other interests, and coaches that show them that they care and believe in them, just not as only athletes, but people, and how that helps them to know and separate their value and self-worth beyond the playing field. I mean, well, I hope everyone today has been inspired and you continue to seek opportunities to learn, to ask, and then to listen, to give back, and to do the work to take action to create positive cultures within your programs for all those involved. So thank you all today for your time. Continue to access our resources at positivecoach.org. And we look forward to the next roundtable conversation. Thank you all so much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Stay safe.